Welcome to Season 7 of the Retail Tea Break podcast. My name is Melissa Moore, the Retail Advisor and Rethink Retail Top Retail Expert for 2024. Each week, I'll be joined by industry experts, retailers and brands to dispel the myths, share knowledge, and give you an insight into the retail industry. Listen back to previous episodes on your favourite podcast platform or, of course, on YouTube. And while you're there, please do subscribe to the podcast so that you get to listen first every single week. So in the meantime, grab that cup of tea, sit back and listen in to Season 7 of the Retail Tea Break podcast. Today, I'm joined by a guest who's an international business Imagineer, focused on building growth, unleashing relationships in symbiosis between commercial understanding and shopper insights. He's been a transformational leader and growth architect for Nike, Nestlé, Carlsberg in Denmark, the Netherlands, Croatia, and the US. He has an extensive commercial experience from leadership roles in sales, marketing, planning, business development, retail, and analytics. Passionate about unleashing the synergies between commercial strategy, commercial leadership, and intelligence integration in the pursuit of building consumer bonds. This growth architect believes that growing teams and growing those consumer bonds is the foundation of growing your business. Torben Valsted, Chief Imagineer, welcome to the Retail Tea Break podcast.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Thank you so much for having me.
I am so freaking excited about this conversation. Obviously, we introduced you a few weeks ago on the season opener for Season 7 when we were joined by a group of retail wizards, as I wanted to call you all. But it's great to have you on in your own right for this episode, and I have absolutely no idea where this is going. Anyone that knows Torben and has read his LinkedIn post will know that you have a lot to say. And actually, I should point out at this stage before we start that if you're not watching us on YouTube, you must pop over and take a look at the video because your background behind you today is full of information. So there's a video playing behind Torben that's a couple of minutes long. So I would urge you, if you're not already, take a look on YouTube because it's going to add a whole other layer to the information that we talk about today. Anyway, to kick us off, in the age-old tradition of the Retail Tea Break podcast, in the time that it takes to boil a kettle, which of course I'm informed is about 2 minutes, tell us about you and the business.
Yeah, first of all, I'm not sure if I can boil a kettle in 2 minutes, but but I'm super excited about having this conversation. As you talked about in your introduction of me, which is difficult to live up to in a certain way. Yeah, I've been around. I think I've been very fortunate in my career and been working for what I call CNN, right, in a fun way. So Carlsberg, Nestlé, and Nike. And I've had the great fortune of being allowed to do things that I wanted to do, not routine stuff, right? I've been really allowed to Imagineer things. And for me, Imagineering is about imagining the future and engineering to it. So I've been in roles where I've been building a new beer brand in Croatia from scratch. I've been pioneering trade marketing in Denmark, the first one ever doing it, transforming how we are doing digital transformation or driving decisions with insight at Nike, or how we were optimizing assortment. So really trying to reinvent the way we were doing business. But one thing has been the common denominator, and that was that the consumer and the shopper was always in the center. So it's always about hearing the voice of the consumer, of the shopper. And I think that's where we're losing a bit of the grip today in today's business. You know, for me, business is a little bit one of the things that I found from everything I've been doing, right, around the world, working with amazing leaders. And by the way, when I say I have been doing, of course, I've been doing it together with amazing teams, right? So I've been working with unbelievable people, and we've been changing the game. But one of the things that I really realized is that if I boil it all down, in a certain way, business is a bit like a tree, you know, where the trunk is like the DNA that was established when you started in the market. So it was kind of matching the market structures. It's a general leadership. And then you have all of the branches, right? All of the functions, all of the departments, and they're branching out. No, and they're sub-functions, sub-branches. So if you can imagine a tree that is like the organizational structure of a company. And now what we are trying to do is to make these branches kind of work together, isn't it? So what happens is that as the marketplace is changing, we are adding branches all the time. So if we suddenly, if we find ourselves in a pandemic like we did a few years ago, suddenly we are building out an online branch, right? That we are making stronger and stronger. And then we are maybe losing focus on something else. But what really actually happens is that as we evolve as companies, as organizations, these branches tend to become silos. They tend to become more and more distanced from each other and kind of sub-optimizing the business. So you're kind of losing the higher purpose, right? We've all experienced it. We've all been working in companies where there used to be a visionary driving the whole company. Suddenly every function has a vision. And suddenly we are losing track of what we are trying to do.
But if that's, and it's sweeping across retail. And, the more you talk about it the more I'm going, yeah, I can see it's happened with X brand and Y brand, but why? We're all fighting for this bit of pie. And I'm always coming back to the original conversation we had in the season opener. We're all fighting for this bit of pie. So we, of course, if we need to do online, we're doing online. If someone mentions Omni, we're all doing Omni channel, then that's exactly what we're going to call it. They're not. They're telling everyone they are because it's the right thing to do. And is that the way retail's going? We're just going to keep adding on the next thing and the next thing and layering up, or branches sprouting out as you're talking about it. But why is it so goddamn difficult to do that and maintain that authenticity at the same time?
I think it's simply a matter of human beings. As human beings, we like to break things down in manageable parts, right? So the better we can understand something, the better we think that we can manage it, which is great in a certain way, as long as we are on the same track. So when we started our companies, when we started a business, we had a certain structure that matched the marketplace, but the marketplace is changing, and we are trying to adapt, and we are trying to all the time add manageable structures, right? So that everybody can manage each their piece. But what we are losing track of is the whole. So what actually happens is we are building out, and the branches are getting so heavy that the trunk is starting to crack and is starting to fall over, right? So we create these breaks in the trunk, and it's very difficult to get it back because, we always joke by saying, right, that, hey, if you're not happy where you are, move, right? You're not a tree. Hey, but organizations have become trees, right? There is very heavy to move them. And I actually think we started to think that the whole marketplace would change when we had the pandemic. We talked about it in our episode with the whole team, right? So we are betting against anthropology in a certain way, right? The understanding that consumers, human beings, want to act in a certain way. So we thought, okay, all behaviors are going to change. We're going to replace them with new ones. Everybody's going to just shop online. So we saw retailers invest heavily in the online part of the business and not give so much love to what we today are calling retail, right? So that part started to suffer. And then we figured out, hey, people are not continuing to shop online as before. Actually, they're building up this kind of latent need or want to come back to stores, right? And we saw them flock back to stores. It's like, what the hell are we going to do now, right? So now we've been kind of weakening the physical retail part of our business, and we've been building on the online, and we kind of got lost in that. But I actually think that the biggest paradigm shift that happened way before the pandemic.
Now, this is, and I really want to point this out to people because this is fascinating, because you're one of the only people that still talks about this, which is why I've interrupted you before you say it. That actually you're going to bring us right back before COVID. Like 2020 was bad enough for most retailers. Let's be honest. Some were prepared for this mass online kind of shift. Some definitely weren't. Some still aren't. But actually, you want to take us back way, way further than that. And you really think that this is the kind of the impact or the gong that smacked it all off?
Yeah, and I don't think we even really realized how big it was. And I think we're still scrambling to figure out what it really was and how we are going to respond to it. And I think very few organizations are managing to do so. So we have to go back to 2008, No, so I keep saying that, you know, everything we are doing in business is great. We're doing business as usual. We are doing what everybody else as a normal businessman or woman will do. And that's all great until some crazy person comes and show us that it's not the right thing, right? And what Steve Jobs showed us in 2008 was that the way we were kind of interacting was not the way of the future, right? So he brought us the smartphone, no, and yeah, they disrupted a complete mobile phone industry, right? Nokia had learned for smartphones before, they just didn't believe in it. BlackBerry didn't believe in it. You know, 1 year later they were kind of dead. But what it really did, from a broader perspective, was that it gave consumers freedom. Suddenly we could move around, right? When I was a kid, if I wanted to watch a movie, I would be looking in the newspaper in the morning to see what's on the telly tonight, right? And I would sit there at 9 o'clock waiting for the movie. And most likely I would watch the whole bloody damn thing, even if it was not a movie that I liked, right? But there was not so much other choice. No, today, like everybody else, I'll be watching 5 to 10 minutes of 10 different movies before I find the one that makes me fall asleep, right? So we've created this zapper culture where people are moving in and out. We are on the go all the time. We're always connected. We are digitized. We are zappers. No, we don't interact with brands like we used to. You know, in the old days, we all remembered the latest great TV commercial, right? All of the emotional ones from all of the great brands. You know, I worked for Nike, and a lot of people remember a lot of the old Nike brands or Coca-Cola brands, Pepsi, what is called ads and so on, right? But which ones do you remember from the last 3 months?
It's
Right?
so true, though.
No,
And I
you
think
don't,
that's
right?
almost quite scary. And, you know, when I think of key adverts, I think of the big brands like the Coca-Cola one at Christmas. There are,
Yeah,
so even McDonald's over the years, especially as a kid. But I couldn't tell you what I saw, even if I did see any adverts on the TV last night or on the radio or whatever it might be. God, I'm showing my age now. Yes, I listen to the radio, and yes, I might read the odd newspaper, but I genuinely, Torben, I
it
couldn't
doesn't stick
tell you.
anymore, right?
No.
So we used to live in a world where brands could reach us in a very
Yeah.
emotional way. They could affect our minds, right? That's where the word brand comes from, right? There was branding cows in the old days. That's where it came from. So the idea of something sticking, but to our minds, or creating mind space. No, in our digitized world where we all zappers and we are on the go all the time and we are not connected to a certain channel, and brands can't reach us with these kind of emotions that they could in the old days, they're struggling with building mind space with consumers, right? So they don't have the impact they used to. If you're looking at the biggest brands in the world, and they're actually just behind me right now, there.
We've got Google. If those of you that can't see the screen, there's Google up there, obviously Microsoft,
Yeah.
Apple,
Some are
TikTok, Instagram, Samsung, the usual
old
crowd. Amazon is
brands, right?
there. Yeah.
They're old brands. Where are the ones from the last 5 to 10 years? They're not there. No, because we shifted everything to transactional platforms, and brands are now using transactional advertising to communicate with their consumers, and it doesn't stick. No, you get all of the offers, all of the promotions, and so on, but it's not building a connection with the brand. No, and that's why I claim that bonding is new branding. We have to shift the game completely now. We need to start bonding with consumers, with shoppers in every interaction we have, in every engagement we have. But that's a completely different game, no, and is one where you need to be much more agile than you were in the past. In the past, you could kind of sit in the marketing office, right? And you could send out all of these great messages, and in the fight for mind space, if you're really good at it, you would win the consumer. You don't do that anymore. We are not, responsive to all of the advertising.
Do you really think though, like if we've already spoken about at the beginning of this episode, the fact that retailers and brands aren't even getting the basics right now. So if we've got this great big tree and they're growing branches at a ridiculous rate because they're trying to do the latest thing or meet the latest platform or just go after the completely wrong customer because their competition is, do you really think that they have the sense, I want to say, to actually stop slow down, bring it right back to the customer, and actually think, hang on, like in the old days, we need to actually have an emotional connection here, the bond that you talk about. Like, do you think they have, like, does anyone out there right now have the sense to actually slow down and do that?
I think very few realize what kind of change that it takes.
Mm.
And very few are facing it, right? I think to your point about bonding and the good old days, right? The last time we really had strong bonds was when we had the milkman come to our house, right? And he would even be under suspicion for being the father of kids. So so we kind of have to figure out how we do the milkman at scale. And we have the technology to do it today. But I think we haven't realized the need of doing it. And I think we haven't realized what is that paradigm shift really driving in the marketplace and in terms of expectations from consumers. And that's where we are missing out. So instead, we start talking about all of the buzz, right? So imagine now if we have an online branch and we have an offline branch. So we have a retail part of our organization, we have a digital part of our organization. Imagine now if we in some mysterious way can connect them with talking about omni-channel or online to offline.
The dream, the goal for a lot of retailers.
So we are creating these kind of, weird kind of connections in our organization that are not full-hearted, right? It's just like, whew, we cannot change the whole tree. We cannot change the trunk. So let's try to use what we have and try to connect them. Or if that doesn't work, we can do experiential retail, right? Or we can do a self-checkout experience. It's probably going to work. No, we have to rethink the whole thing. No.
What's wrong with having that? You've already said at the beginning there that we should be, driving people into stores. It's great that footfall is back up in physical stores. What's wrong with a bit of like, I love it. Everyone that listens to this knows I love a bit of experiential that's done for the right reason and for the customer's benefit. Some really good experiential retail. Surely that wow factor or that experience is good for a brand.
Yeah, I mean, it can be. And I'm not saying that it's not. What I'm trying to say is that we shouldn't do experiential retail for the sake of doing experiential retail.
Yeah, okay.
We should drive a purpose, right? So I believe we got a bit lost, right? And I'm saying we is including myself. I'm not excluding myself. I'm not sitting here like I'm the only one understanding this, right? I think we all got a bit lost, right? So we could just get excited about doing certain things. For me, it's about creating a 360 experience, where everything comes together in a story, just like we had the brand story in the old days, right? So everything makes sense for the consumer when they are interacting with us. They feel the DNA of the brand, right? They feel the intent to bond with them. And in every experience, right now, it's a broken experience for most brands, right? So we try to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And yeah, sometimes experiential retail works. Very often it ends up, in my opinion, like a little bit of an amusement park, right?
Yeah.
Like you go there once, or a theater, you go there once. You don't necessarily want to come back and see it again because you already saw it, right?
Does the way that bonding happens matters, or is it just the fact that the bonding needs to happen through the channel that best suits the customer?
Yeah, it is a good question. I think we need to be very agile. So we need to figure ways of connecting with consumers. And I think one of the big buzzwords as of recently, right, is personalization. So
It's been used many a time on this podcast, I must say.
yeah, I can imagine, right? I mean, personalization is this idea of getting closer to a consumer, right? But what it really becomes in most situations or in most applications is really a different kind of segmentation, right? So we segment consumers into certain groups, and then we start communicating to everyone in that group in the same way. So it's not a one-to-one communication, but it's a one-to-many, but with a more targeted kind of approach, right? I don't know about you, but I don't know how many emails every day because I always want to check out the different membership programs, right? So I'm an easy target when I go to a store. I always ask, so what do I get in return if I become a member? oh, you'll get all of the latest stuff. I said, I don't want that. I don't want emails. You know, I want to bond with you. I want to have a relation with you. I want you to understand me so you can give me more of what I want. Yeah, but that's what we are going to do. And, you know, at the end, I just get a lot of transactional
Oh,
emails.
you'd be a nightmare walking into a store, wouldn't you? But that's really interesting because over the last few years, and even on this podcast, and I'm certainly not knocking any brands, you know, the whole idea, you call it membership, you know, the whole simple idea is grab that customer's email and absolutely, yeah, we get the data as a retailer, but in turn, they get the offers that suit them. So whether it's the dog food or the shampoo or whatever, you know, we can tell them ahead of time when all the sales are coming up. But actually, as you're starting to point out here, that's still very transactional. There's no interaction there between the brand and the shopper.
No, it's both transactional and it's very general, right? It's not really, I don't feel those emails are target
Mm.
me, right? So God forbid that I bought a present for a kid, right? Then I'm starting to get emails about kid stuff, right? I don't have any kids. I don't want all of those emails, right? So it's kind of computer systems are trying to sense which segment do you belong to, and then it's sending out a lot of transactional messages. It's not listening to me, and there is a difference between personalization and personal. Personal is like when we are talking here, right? We start trying to understand each other, we reflect upon each other's words and thoughts and where we want to go with the conversation, right? So we are actually building a bond between us. Imagine what we can do with AI, no? And how we can drive that kind of conversation, actually listening to consumers. That's where I think AI is going to be very applicable in the future. But again, we have to flip things. We shouldn't do AI for the purpose of doing AI, right?
Which is what's happening out there right now.
Which is where it's happening now. All of the talking down, right, is about, okay, let's apply AI. I'm like, no, let's talk about what is the strategy. If bonding is new branding, which is going to come up on my screen here and back in a minute. If bonding is the new branding, how are we going to bond with consumers? What is the strategy behind it? What are all of the points of interaction? I call them vibe points, no? All of the points where we are creating good vibe with consumers, with shoppers, and how do we want to interact with consumer shoppers at each of those moments of truth, right? Because that becomes our complete story. And then we ask ourselves, how can technology help us do that? How can AI help us do that? I'm not against technology. I'm not against AI. I'm a gadget freak myself. I love technology, no, but we have to apply it in the right way. No, when you're in a store and the checkout experience, the self-checkout experience is not working, it just feels dreadful, right?
It does, and it's stressful. And I think that's to me, and to me as a shopper now, not as a retailer, that's when you just give up. That's when you demand that person to person interaction because you want to buy your stuff, you want to give the retailer money, and you want to get out the goddamn door. So I agree with you. And I think that's where a lot of consumer frustration comes in. It's when the tech is broken or it breaks the journey at the end of the day. That's the reason the shopper's there. They want a smooth journey. You know, if they want interaction, they'll have it. If they don't want to talk to you and they want to scan and go, let's allow them to do it.
Then
But
you start to
I
get suspicious, right?
yeah, you
Is that
do.
experience made to really service me better, or was it made to save staff in the store, right? Yeah, and you start to ask yourself those questions because if the experience is dubious, if it's not a good experience, you're like, why are they doing this, right? So I experience a lot of good self-checkout experiences, but I also experience bad ones, right? And I like a self-checkout experience, honestly, if it works well, because it just gets me out of there quick, right? I can just as well do it myself. And I feel a little bit in control, but we're all different, right? So I think we have to think carefully about, do we need different types of experiences, how we make optimizing them, and how do we make it part of that 360 experience, right?
Tell us though, because I am fascinated and I want to bring us to what's been rolling on your screen. And again, if you haven't seen this on YouTube, do pop on and have a look. You have, I want to say a solution, or I want to say the start of a solution, but you've got this mammoth, and it's not an idea. It's an incredible strategy that brings everything that we've been talking about together to really feed into this. So explain a little bit.
Yeah, so I spent the past 12 months working on what I believe is the essence of everything I learned for more than 30 years, working with shoppers, consumers, retail, brands, marketing, sales. I did the whole 360 commercial journey, right, in different companies. So I've really been asking myself, what is the essence of it all? What is it that I've really learned, and why are we always trying to reinvent the wheel? So every time I've been working with a client, it's like we're asking ourselves, what have we been doing in the past? What can we use from the past? So we just repeat stuff that maybe doesn't work in the new paradigm, right? But what is kind of the essence of all of that? And that's what I've been trying to construe. So, sometimes people are asking me, and you've been asking me, what is retail, right? So my answer is, what retail? I'll take out the is, because as long as we keep talking about retail, I believe we're going to get it wrong. And the reason why is we need to take the full step. We need to replace the trunk, the DNA, the way we lead. It starts with the CEO. Why are we calling it a chief executive officer, right? It's like they're saying he's the boss 3 times. Let's call it the consumer experience officer, the one who is really responsible for the consumer experience, right? And now here's the thing. We talk about retail as physical stores, and we talk about web shops, or digital sales, or e-commerce, whatever name we give it, right? But here's the thing. We try to connect it with omnichannel and O2O and so on, right? But here's the thing. Consumers don't see any channels. They don't see any lines, online, offline. They are in what I call the shopperverse, where everything flows together, right? So they just want a seamless, connected shopping experience. So yeah, I call that the shopperverse. We should start not talking about retail anymore or web shops anymore. We have to talk about the shopperverse, because that's where the shoppers are, where the consumers are. Let's join them. Right?
And that's an interesting point right there. Instead of them coming to us online, offline, omni-channel, whatever you call it, you're flipping that straight away and going, hang on, they're not coming to us. We need
So
to
why
go
are we
to
having
them.
an online function and an offline function, whatever we call them, right? We should have a shopperverse function. That's taking the full step, right? That's replacing that trunk. Why do we keep trying to patch things and connect branches that are not connectable? We have to face and we need to change the foundation of how we work. Back in the time with Nike, we didn't even talk about our competitors. We talked about consumers. We talked about shoppers. We were obsessed with that. And it was like we were on autopilot. It was like every decision it was logical. It was like it just made by volition, right? There was no question, why were we doing this? But if you would ask people, what is the formula? People would be hard challenged to answer, right? So I always love to say, if only Nike knew what Nike knows. So I've been trying to use some of those insights, some of that experience with Nike, blended with what I learned at Carlsberg and Nestlé, to put together Imagineership, right? And what I learned was that, imagine you're on a deserted island, a group of people. What do? You start doing intel, right? You start figuring out what is on this island. Can we live from what is on this island? You start contemplating a strategy. What is our survival strategy as long as we need to be here? How are we going to, send a message for help? What are we going to do, right? Strategically. And you appoint kind of leadership roles, right? You decide who should do what. So it's all about one purpose, is about surviving on this island. And it's very intuitively understood that you need to do intel, strategy, and leadership all coming together for that one purpose. So when we are working on instinct, we understand that. When you're thinking about your own career and your own life, you did the same thing, right? You did intel. What are my opportunities out there, right? You did strategy. You're deciding, how am I going to go about it, right? And you did your own leadership. You're your own leader. You're making your own decisions, right? Now, the thing is, today, as we've been alluding to previously in our conversation, intel is one function, right? That is a silo. Strategy, so intel is sitting with some tech people very often, or analytical people, right? Strategy is sitting with some commercial people and is kind of one silo for itself. Leadership, HR is taking care of it, right? At least the general thinking of how we are supposed to do it in the company. So those three cornerstones of business are getting separated. And we make brain surgery out of it. The slide that is actually behind me right now is trying to illustrate that. So if you go to the bookstore, you go on LinkedIn, you go to the library, you can find excellent books about leadership, right? You can find excellent books about strategy. You can find excellent books about Intel. You cannot find one book about how they work together. And that's why I'm saying there is no leadership. You know, leadership without strategy and Intel cannot function. There is no Intel. Intel without strategy and leadership cannot function. It's just as simple as that. So we need to get those three cornerstones of business together in one unified approach. And that's what I've been working on creating and want to disrupt the whole business world with. I believe it can be a real game changer. And I believe that companies that will adapt that thinking can actually create an adaptable trunk, you know, the DNA that we were talking about before. Because when Intel strategy and leadership are working together for the same purpose, which is to sense, think, and feel consumer bonds. I'm lucky that the slides are fitting in behind me, right? When they work together, then everything comes together in the organization, and there are no silos anymore because everyone is working on the same thing. And the purpose, in my humble opinion, is to create good vibe bonds. No, so create good vibe in every interaction, in every engagement with consumers, with the purpose of cultivating bonds. No, and that comes from understanding the whole consumer journey and interacting in a way that is part of a 360 experience. No, so all of that coming together. That's how we're going to disrupt the game. That's how we're going to change the game. That's how we're going to create companies that can build bonds with consumers. And I believe that the companies that will start doing this first, the first runners, they're going to win the game.
And that's so interesting because we're talking, it's almost like we're using really heavy words here, like disruption, but actually we're doing it in an incredibly gentle and quite traditional way because you're stripping it all back. And as you keep saying, it's about this idea of Intel strategy and leadership, core themes for any business. However, as you said at the beginning here, a lot of retailers, they seem to have lost that over the last kind of 10 years or so, or certainly over the last 5. They've just gone after the next quick thing. But bringing it back to these almost traditional values, this simplicity, you know, and tying it together, it definitely feels like the right way forward because you're doing it then for the right reason with the values of the business at the core of everything.
Yeah, I believe that business by nature is simple, you know, and we are not here to complicate matters. You know, if you think about it, business started in the marketplace, you know, or on a traditional market, I mean, right? We were haggling. You know, somebody was selling a product, vegetables or whatever it was, and then somebody was buying, and we were haggling for the price, right? And the business was simple. It was about selling one of your product one day, two the next day, four the next day, then 8, then 16, then 32, 64, and so on. And business was running, right? It was as simple as that. We just got a bit lost and we complicated it tremendously, right? So if business is not about creating good vibe to cultivate bonds by unifying Intel strategy and leadership, what is it? No, what is business? Because that's for me the essence. The thing is, as we started talking about from the very beginning, right, is that we build companies in a certain way to a certain purpose, to a certain marketplace. And then we've been branching out and we've been trying to figure out how can we keep the trunk, but try to adapt to what is happening. And these branches are just getting more and more heavy, right? And they're weighing down the whole tree and it breaks. No? And then we can't anymore interact with consumers in the way they expect, right? Then the shoppers, they're waiting for us to create experiences where everything connects. That's why, for me, when I say Intel strategy and leadership, I also simplify that, right? It's about sensing, thinking, and feeling consumers. No,
it's back to that emotional connection, isn't it? Which again is very
emotional
traditional.
connection, right? Sense the consumers, no, to drive connectivity. That's what technology can do, right? It can drive connectivity. It can sense consumers at pace to keep up with them and interact with them in a personal way when they expect it on their terms, right? It's about thinking 360 experience, the whole story, and how all of the moments of truth are chained together in a way we engage with consumers or want to engage in a storytelling way that builds the brand. And it's about feeling consumers. Leadership is about feeling consumers, right? I also say that it's about bondability. That's not a word in the dictionary, by the way. I realize that. No, but it is a little bit inspired from, when we say to be loved, you have to be lovable, right? But this is the idea of to bond with consumers, you need to be bondable, right?
So true.
How
so
often,
true.
what was your last experience calling a customer service where you felt afterwards, oh, this brand really gets me? That was a brilliant experience.
There was one, and it is incredibly memorable, and it probably happened years ago, and that was with good old Dyson. It's the best customer experience via a phone call I've ever had. It was swift, it was efficient. They got me, they got the issue. The issue was fixed within a few
It felt
days.
good, right?
And everyone knows about it. Everyone I've ever met probably knows about that Dyson story because it is so rare. It really is.
It is really rare, right? So why is it rare? It's because when we are getting lost in what we're trying to do, then we also become internal directed, right? We start thinking about what is it that we want as an organization, right? So we start to think about our own great ideas, and we kind of lose track of what the consumers want, no? And then we don't reach them. Why don't we build on that feeling in business today, in shopperverse today, that when we interact with consumers, with customers, and we are vulnerable, we are gonna create a lovely feeling, and we're gonna give love back, no? And when we are running the same purpose, we are also bonding as teams because we are working together on the same thing. Intel, strategy, leadership, sensing, thinking, feeling is all coming together. So we build Imagineers in the organization that works together to build good vibe bonds with consumers. And guess what? You don't have to grow the business. It will grow itself.
That's so true. Get your people behind you, treat them well, and your customers will love you back and keep coming back. Torben, on that note, because we could definitely talk all day and all night about this. What an incredibly thought-provoking conversation. And if you've enjoyed today's podcast episode, please do like and share it. And of course, pop over to YouTube there if you haven't been watching and check out the video that's playing along behind Torben, because it really will add another layer to this episode. Remember, you can also listen back to the past Retail Tea Break podcast episodes on your favorite podcast platform, or of course on YouTube. Connect with myself and Torben on LinkedIn. Obviously, check out his incredible posts with amazing animation that he pops up all the time. And remember, you'll be able to find today's show notes and the transcript for today's episode on theretailadvisor.ie. Torben, it's been phenomenal. It's been really thought-provoking and challenging, but actually at the essence, a really strong basic retail conversation about retail basics and the essence of that word that you love to hate, retail. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me, Melissa. And let's go into the shopperverse. Let's meet with consumers. Let's sense their journey and master their vibe. That's what it's all about. And that's how simple business should be. And that's how we can drive a game-changing approach into the future. Thank you.